Gulls Thursday is back, and we've got a pair of wins to talk about on this episode of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez. I've been covering minor league hockey for well over a decade, and I'm doing the public address for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, and I've also contributed to Defend the Nest. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. In today's program, well, first off, this is the return of Gulls Thursday now that the AHL is back. Gulls Thursday is our weekly look at the San Diego Gulls, the team right down the 5 freeway. And there's a lot of future Ducks that are sure to be on this roster. It seems like every year there's at least one player that stands out for San Diego, finds his way onto the Ducks roster. We've seen it before with Troy Terry. We saw it with Sam Carrick, who was with the Gulls for a long time. He's not a member of the Ducks. So, hey, you all could be watching the future down in San Diego. But we're going to talk about the 2 games that took place here in Ontario, California, just down the street from me at the moment. And these were no contest. Now, I have been on the record saying that Ontario has fielded a weaker team this season. They have a bit of a weaker, actually they have a lot of holes in defense. But number one, their goaltending. Their goaltending, I think, is the biggest question mark this season. And we definitely saw it in this game. Actually, in both games, really. Because you had David Riddick in one end. And then you had either Alex Stalock or Callie Klang on the other end. And David Riddick hasn't looked too good to start off the season. In fact, David Riddick started both games. He's got a goals against over 4 and a save percentage hovering around .850. That is not good. Friday's game, opening night at Toyota Arena in Ontario. This was all San Diego, almost from the get-go. I've talked about this player before several times. I've talked about him on the Ducks side, but I got to talk about him on the Gulls side because the Regenda agenda is here to stay. I still believe that he deserves a spot on the Ducks roster, and I sincerely think that if someone in Anaheim gets injured, Pavol Regenda deserves a shot. He scored the first goal of the season for San Diego, a nice power play goal from one of my guys, Sasha Pasujov, and someone else I believe highly in, Olin Zellweger. Now, first off, that power play unit that the Gulls employed, you got Zellweger, Regenda, Nestorenko, Pasujov, Gaucher. Ooh, a nice mix of veterans and youngins. This is good. This is good to, first off, get someone that is so adept at quarterbacking a power play like Olin Zellweger. We saw it in this one, so that made it 1-0 early on. Second period, not a whole lot happening. In fact, there was a lot of just, I would say, rough-ish stuff, and Ontario was starting to get stronger. They were starting to tilt the ice in their favor. Then the third period, it was just all offense all the time. San Diego did commit a few penalties late in the game. Jacob Perreault for slashing, Andrew Agozzino with a bad interference call, and Travis Howe holding at the very end. Like, why? So, whatever. It seemed like San Diego was mostly in the box in the third period, and they legit were. And yet, during that Jacob Perreault penalty in the third period, Pavol Regenda wound up with a short-handed goal, his second of the game. So he's already scored the first 2 goals of the season, 2-0 San Diego. So already the power play's looking better, the penalty kills looking better. Who is this team? This is not the Gulls we saw last season. And then Jacob Perreault, his first of the season, Mikhail Maltsev scored late for Ontario. And then Glenn Godden potted an empty netter. That's your final score for Friday the 13th. Woo, 4-1 in favor of San Diego. The following game on Sunday. This is where things got a little bit testy. Okay, a lot testy. Okay, more than a lot testy. The players were getting into it. The coaches, even the fans were getting into it on Sunday. Even though it wasn't a huge crowd, it was a lively crowd. Is that the right term? Yeah, there were a lively bunch, folks. Back and forth in the first period. Ryan Francis scored for Ontario. Andrew Agozzino scored for San Diego, 1-1 after a period. That was a power play goal, by the way. Then Alex Turcotte, one of the few bright spots for Ontario, he scores on the power play. San Diego then comes alive. Ben King scored. Judd Caulfield scored. Yes! Then Brant Clark, the Wunder kid for the LA Kings organization, he scored his first of the season on a power play. Then things got bad. After Jacob Perreault scored his second goal of the season, this is where I had a little bit of fun here, like just watching everything happening, because it seemed like everybody was pissed off at each other. As soon as Jacob Perreault scored, you had a couple of Reign players, not like some of the celebrating. Yes, there was some chirping. There was. This was also a very important goal because that gave the San Diego Gulls the lead with just about 30 seconds left in the period. 4-3 they're up. Ontario gets a little bit upset. David Rittich. Can you believe this? David Rittich tried to come across the ice. He wanted to drop pans. I'm like, the goalie? The goalie wants to drop? What's going on here? Then Tynan got into it. Brant Clark got into it. Trevor Carrott got into it. No punt, there was no punches or no fighting, but there was a lot of very heavy shoving. Yeah, that's what we'll call it. Heavy shoving. It was enough to get a lot of penalties in the box and enough to give the Reign a power play, which they did nothing with. After that, the Regenda agenda is back. Pavol Regenda, his third of the season, making it 5-3 San Diego. Ontario would score with a couple minutes left. Charles Hudon making it 5-4. But then, with the Gulls on the power play, because of it was a not smart penalty by Charles Hudon for a high stick at the very end. Josh Lapina scored with just under a second left towards the empty net. And that's the game. San Diego won it 6-4. They sweep the weekend series in Ontario. All right, we're going to talk. I'm going to give my impressions on which players stood out the most, my impressions on the two games so far this season, and what's next to come for the San Diego Gulls. Stay locked in. And now, a word from FanDuel. That is right. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And hey, it is football season, so snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. There's also the NBA and NHL as well. You got all kinds of futures bets going on. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, futures, over-unders, and much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please, gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, or in this case, Locked On Gulls, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with JD Hernandez. Let's talk about the entirety of the weekend and which players stood out the most. First, I'm going to start with who it should start with, Pavol Regenda. Now, Regenda's already got 3 goals in 2 games so far. 2 of those goals, by the way, came off of some nice feeds, but the shot selection has looked better for Pavol Regenda in general. He's not looking to just stuff the sheet. He's looking to make the quality shot, which I appreciate. Because I know there's some heavy volume guys, and Regenda did get a lot of shots off, especially in that Sunday game. Like, I feel like Sunday's game, he was pressing a little bit more. But more often than not, he was looking for the quality shot, and he was looking for the shot that would either go in the back of the net or generate some kind of offensive scheme. Where Regenda really shines is his movement once he crosses the blue line. He's not content to stay in one spot. And this is something that I made sure to pay attention to on Sunday's game especially, is Regenda is not lazy when it comes to trying to receive the puck and getting into the areas, not the dirty areas, but the unconventional areas where some guys like to park themselves behind the net. Some guys get to the dirty areas. Pavol Regenda has a tendency to kind of go in between that, where he'll kind of go along the line a little bit, or he'll be under the home plate area. So home plate is between the pipe and the face-off dot. And Regenda likes to angle off just a little bit to the side of that, which isn't bad because normally guys aren't defending too much in that area, which might explain why we've seen Regenda get some open opportunities so far this season. So it's really been just the movement in general, but where he's placing himself. I also really like the movement off the puck. This is something that has been more creative on his side. Maybe this is a coaching thing. Maybe this is McIlvain trying to figure out some kind of schemes in order for guys to get open shots. That's my assumption anyway. And that's something else that I've noticed in general. Not just Regenda. I'm like, Regenda more so than everyone else. But there's a couple other guys that have done a good job of that. Would you believe I'm going to give props to Trevor Carrick here, the other Maple brother. Trevor Carrick has composed himself as a steady veteran that gets at the right places at the right time. But there's an old saying from Branch Rickey, and luck is the residue. I think it's luck is the residue of good preparation. I think that's kind of how the quote goes. The reason that Trevor Carrick is at the right place at the right time is because he places himself in a region where he can make some decent passes and make some pretty solid plays. And Carrick is another one that doesn't lose pucks. He's good on the blue line. Same with Olen Zellweger, who is growing up before our very eyes. Zellweger is still considered a rookie, by the way. And for him to get off to a hot start, already 3 apples this season. And Zellweger, by the way, I would say he's going to be one of the more improved. I shouldn't say improved because we saw how good he was in juniors. We know how good he is. Zellweger so far has got 3 assists. Now, granted, they're not primary. They're all secondary assists, which is why I think I put a little bit more emphasis on Trevor Carrick having a very good weekend as opposed to Olen Zellweger. But that's just me. That's just me. Not to say Zellweger's bad. No. I'm not saying that at all. Zellweger's still very good. But if I had to single out a defenseman that I thought showed me something and impressed me the most, I would give the slight nod to Trevor Carrick. But Olen Zellweger's right behind. He's right there. Who else do I want to give props to? Trevor Carrick. How about Glenn Godden? Glenn Godden, that's someone else that is picking his corners and picking his spots. Same with Jacob Perreault. Perreault has looked good as well, picking his spots. So I'll give credit where credit is due there. Godden has already got a point and assist. He's always had that kind of solid all-around game. That's what I think when I see Glenn Gaudin on the ice is he's pretty good defensively, solid passer, can put the puck away when he has to. And that's Gaudin in a nutshell. That's how he's always been. He was like that with the Stockton Heat. More so with the Stockton Heat, he was way more pass first when it came to Stockton. But Stockton also had just an incredible lineup that included Matthew Phillips. With San Diego, now he can kind of be the guy a little bit. And he can look to shoot more, which I am more than fine with. So those are some of the guys that have impressed me the most over the past weekend. And finally, a quick look ahead to this coming weekend. So the Gulls are in action once again. Friday against this same Ontario Reign team. 3 games and they're already playing each other 3 times. This time at Pechanga Arena for their home opener, Friday, October 20th. That is tomorrow night at Pechanga Arena. Then on Tuesday, San Diego hits the road down the I-8 freeway to take on the Tucson Roadrunners at TCC. Tucson and San Diego have been rivals since Tucson's come in. There's kind of a natural, southern rivalry down the I-8 freeway. Maybe kind of a manufactured-ish rivalry because they haven't really played in important games yet. But that's always a spirited affair. And Tucson likes to muscle around more than a little bit. So that'll be interesting to see how they do. Tucson so far, they've looked decent. I mean, they've won both of their games, but they're not scoring a whole lot. In fact, Tucson is more of the grit and the dirt, so to speak, and more of just trying to crunch everybody and try to have their way inside the home plate area. That's more of Tucson's game, whereas Ontario's a little more higher pace, a little more run and gun. But I think it's more of a rivalry with the Ontario Reign because they're closer in proximity, but also because Ontario and San Diego have played some very important playoff games against each other in multiple seasons. 2016, 2017, we saw some epic battles between the Reign and the Gulls. And that last one that I mentioned, that was where San Diego won Game 5 at home against Ontario. So you're looking at, so far, the rivalry already budding, already taking place. I already know it's going to be rowdy down at Pechanga Arena. So if you haven't got your tickets yet, get them now. I think it's going to be almost a packed house at Pechanga come Friday night. So that is the upcoming schedule for the San Diego Gulls. And I predict that Pavol Regenda is going to get another goal against Ontario. It's too bad there's no betting for minor league hockey, for AHL. But if I were to place a bet, if I were a betting man, I would put a C note. Yeah, I'd put a C note on Pavol Regenda scoring against Ontario again. And would they dare start Rittich again? I don't know if they would, because Ontario so far has looked fairly weak this season. Yeah, I don't know what to make of the Ontario Reign, but I do know what to make of the San Diego Gulls. Just in general, the puck movement has gotten better. Matt McIlvaine already off to a tremendous start in San Diego. So, Ducks fans, if you want to see some really good hockey action on Friday, I know there's not a game on Friday, Ducks fans. So head on down the 5 freeway, head down the Santa Ana freeway, make your way off of Midway District. And if it's not sold already, grab a ticket for Friday night's game against the Ontario Reign. It's always fun. It's always spirited. They always do a great job down there. Check it out. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Gulls Thursday. I want to thank you all sincerely for tuning in, and thanks to those of you for listening in as well. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, ad-free on Amazon, and we're also on YouTube and SiriusXM. If you want to drop me a line, you could do so at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. The Twitter, @StimpyJD. The show's Twitter, @LO_Ducks. This is going to be our last episode of the week. Again, still in the midst of moving around some stuff. I think by next month I'll have my spot. I'll begin to decorate it a little bit. So next month, shows will come with a little bit more regularity, Monday through Friday. But for now, this is the final show of the week. So I want to thank you all for listening, and thanks for your patience, and thanks for sticking around. Really appreciate you guys. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez, saying have a great rest of the afternoon, and have a good weekend, everyone. Please remember to be safe out there, be kind to one another, and Ducks and Gulls fly together.